Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening for some of you. I know it's getting late on the East Coast, and in Europe it's bedtime. But we're going to try to do another one of our live chats today. The cable's been acting up a little bit on the camcorder today, more than usual. So we're gonna try to keep real close tabs on whether or not we're still live or not. And if we cut out, we'll try to figure out where we cut out and back up to that and continue on. I think it's likely to be a little more problematic today because we're going to be trying to move around a lot more. You know, in previous chats, we've been in my cabin or we've been in one spot. Yesterday we moved around a little bit, but today, you know, we're gonna try to do more of that. We're going to start down here at the Lower River platform. Right now we're on what the park rangers call the satellite platform. The main Lower River platform is off in this direction, and that's where the Lower River camera is mounted. And we're going to start here at this location, and we think that we'll be visited in about an hour by one of our bear management folks, the person who actually monitors the bears, records their behaviors, activities, and that'll be a real treat for us to spend a little bit of time with her. And then when we're done with that, we are going to run as fast as we can up to the falls and set up there and try to show you, you know, one last bit of extra stuff at the falls. If the bears allow, we'll be going in and down to the fish ladder, give you a good view of that, and just some different views around there and answer some questions there. We have to make sure that we give ourselves enough time, though, to get back here at the end of the day and take the underwater camera out, or at least begin that process. I'm not sure if we'll finish it tonight or not, but that's something that's got to come out before we go. So we have kind of a full schedule today. I know for a fact we're not going to get to everybody's questions because we didn't do it yesterday and we chatted for like it was like a marathon. How many hours did we?
Hour and a half.
2.5 hours, and we didn't even come close to getting everybody's questions. I was scrolling through them last night when I got home, and I'm really sorry about that we missed a bunch of them, because there were some really good questions that we missed. And of course I've slept since then, so I can't remember any of them at the moment. But my radio's on. So, without further ado, what I thought we'd start out with today was trying to cover the tech, because I think we've done a really good job over the last few months of talking about the bears and answering everyone's questions about the bears, bear behavior, salmon, you know, that part of Katmai. But you wouldn't be able to have access to any of this sitting at home were it not for the technology that Explore.org has brought to Katmai National Park. And just a brief history on the webcams here. And I can talk about these webcams and the tech and the trials and tribulations for hours, but I won't subject you to that. Basically, we started in 2008, the first iteration of these webcams, and I'm sure that almost none of you know about this because it was a rather small affair. We had some hiccups trying to get it started. It's difficult to set up a network like this. It's difficult to maintain a network like this. And the Park Service enlisted the aid of some other organizations to help us out. We had the Pratt Museum in Homer. We had National Geographic and Real Networks assisting with it. National Geographic provided some funding. Real Networks provided the data. Pratt Museum provided some funding for it, and the Park Service provided funding in the installation. We ran it very briefly in 2008 because we had, as I mentioned, some technical problems. And when it was running, it was, you know, pretty amazing. It was controlled out of Homer, out of the Pratt Museum, and it was well received by people there. But it did not go out onto the internet with any regularity. There always seemed to be some hiccups in our network access. If you recall, 2008 was the year of the big financial meltdown around the world. And as a result of that, National Geographic and Real Networks pulled out of the partnership. They could no longer fund their wildcam efforts. That left the Pratt Museum and the Park Service to try to keep the system going. Between the two organizations, we could only support with our network streaming 25 simultaneous users. Really low number. I bet right now there's 300 or 400 on a couple of the cams. And I don't know, on this one there's probably 150 or something like that. I don't know, I can't see. But big difference. In July this summer we were at 10,000 people watching the Falls Cam. So huge ability. And we had a hard time keeping it going, and it just got to the point where we couldn't afford to do it anymore. So we shut it down. And I think we tried for 2009 to keep it going, and then by 2010 we had said this isn't going to work. So we just shelved that dream. And I was sitting in my office in February of 2012, I guess. And I got a phone call out of the blue, and it was Tom Pollock from Explore.org, and he said, "Hey, I've got this idea. Would you guys be interested in a webcam?" And I said, "Yes, we would be." Pulled out all of our old plans and started talking to them, and we got very excited about it. They got excited about it, and we figured we could make this happen. But it was gonna involve a fair amount of technology that is not experimental technology by any means, but we're sort of stretching the limits of some aspects of this. So what we have at Brooks Camp, all of our cameras are completely solar powered. So there's solar arrays, and then there's batteries to store that energy. And up on top of Dumpling, where we have, I was going to show you 2 repeaters, but I have to, you can't see that I'm holding up 2 fingers, 2 repeaters. Up on top of Dumpling, we have 2 repeaters that are also solar powered. Everything except for the end in king salmon is powered by solar. So that's something that's pretty cool. You know, if we could have plugged into actual real electricity, that would have made things a lot easier. But around here, where these cameras are, there's no electricity. So we set up these solar panels, and I don't think they're in the frame right now, but I'm going to walk down here and show you the solar panels that operate, or that provide the power for the lower river cams and the underwater cam. And I'm not a solar engineer, so I can't tell you very much about these. At one point, when I was talking to the guys that installed them, I knew how many watts they were. So each of these panels generates 240 watts. And so we have a fair amount of, I was looking at the label underneath there, we have a fair amount of electricity being generated by these panels, and they're angled generally to the south. They're not perfectly to the south because we didn't want to make them stand way off, and they don't track and follow the sun. So that means that right now they're getting, for the next hour or so, they're getting about the maximum amount of sun that they're going to get today, because the sun is right up there and it's hitting them pretty much dead on. Now, in the summertime, we don't really have a problem, because in the summertime there's so much sun, you know, the length of the day is so great that these panels collect sun very, very well. In the wintertime, it becomes a problem. Our days become shorter, and the sun intensity becomes a lot less. And something that you probably, if you thought about it, would make sense. But it's really obvious up here. The sun doesn't rise very high in the sky in the wintertime. It stays very, very low on the horizon. And so what'll happen in the summertime, or sorry, the wintertime, the sun will come up about right here. It'll barely clear the trees, if at all, that are right there. And then it'll scoot over and it'll hide behind this other mountain, and then it'll dip down. So the intensity is low. It's obscured part of the time by these trees and mountains that are way, way over there, and the day is short. So that leads to those diminished hours of daylight. Now, fortunately, when you set up a solar system, you don't just rely on the solar panels to provide the electricity, because the sun is not out all the time unless you happen to be in Barrow, someplace extremely far to the north. So when you have a solar panel, you need to store that energy somehow. And you can store it in various ways. The way we store it in our system here is by using batteries. Now, before I walk over to the battery section, while I'm here, I think Mike might be able to point out the transmitter, and we'll come to this transmitter again in a little bit. But I'll walk down there now, because there's a bear there now. So let me go down there now and point to the transmitter, and then you can see the bear too. So this is the transmitter that transmits the signal from the lower river platform up to the top of Mount Dumpling and then into King Salmon. And this is small, you know, it's about that big. You can see the scale on it, and it's in essence a Wi-Fi transmitter. It's not anything super high tech or exotic. It's just a high-powered Wi-Fi transmitter that is very directional because it has this dish on it, and that beams the signal straight up to the repeater on top. And when we come back down here toward the end of the tech part of this chat, I'll point to the transmitter and you can actually see it. It won't be very clear on the camera, but we'll take you down to it. And I'll come back away from the bear and let it have its space. Okay, so seen the solar panels, the transmitter. As I said, when the electricity is generated by the solar panels, you need to store it somehow to get you through the lean days, the foggy days, the rainy days, and through the night. And we store it in a bank of batteries that we have over here. So Mike's going to have to move the camera, so it's going to get a little jostled here as he picks the camera up and moves it, and we'll make sure that we're live again before I continue. Do you want to look on the Terra deck and make sure it still says live? Okay. So this is the controller box for the lower river cams. And inside of here, we have 4 large batteries for like 12 volt. They're designed specifically for solar panels, but they're a lot like a car battery or a boat battery. So we have 4 of those in here. And then we have a bunch of other electronics in here. And I know that there's probably a couple of you out there that would be really interested in knowing what each of the components are that are in here, but I know that most of you probably wouldn't be that interested in it. But what we've got is a solar controller that takes the energy from the sun, converts it into energy to charge the batteries, and regulates that. On a really sunny day here that goes on for a long, long time, we can overcharge the batteries. And the solar controller will make sure that doesn't happen. It shuts it off before it happens. We can also log into almost every one of the components that are in here remotely over the internet. So in the wintertime, we can call into the solar energy charger and see what the condition is of the batteries here. See the last time they were fully charged, and also see what the voltage is, and estimate how many hours we have left of the charge. And that's what helps us determine how many hours a day we can let the cameras run. And unfortunately, we're now getting into that point where we're going to have to start being really aggressive on the hours here. So we'll probably have to decide, would we rather have sunrise or sunset, or neither, and just have as many of the hours in the middle of the day. But that's something we'll have to work out later. But that's how we figure out what we need to do. And right now the batteries have let me see, they're generating I can't tell, it's changing through it. Anyway, the charge is pretty good on the batteries right now. It's over 12 volts, so that we're in good shape with the batteries. So there are 4 batteries here, and then there's another box that you might be able to make out on this side that is just nothing but batteries. Another 4 batteries in there. And so I've been saying that we're hoping that the upgrades we made to the system this year will allow us to remain online longer. And the additions were another one of the big solar panels over here and all of these batteries. So we doubled the battery capacity, and we added to the solar generation capability here. And it was maybe like another third that we added. So this is very exciting, and this is why we're crossing our fingers and hoping that with an aggressive management of the usage of the cameras and the energy consumption, that we can keep them running longer this year than we have in the past. And okay, so I said this is the satellite platform. There is no camera called the satellite camera. The Explorer calls this camera the Lower River East camera because this direction is to the east. But it's been plugged into the Riverwatch camera for the last how long have we been on this? 2 weeks? Almost 2 weeks that we've been running this camera as well as the Lower River camera. And I'm not sure if it will remain known as the Riverwatch camera, because we may want to turn the original Riverwatch camera back on. So there might be some shuffling around of names and camera locations again. We know the big shuffle that's going to occur here shortly is that we'll be turning off the underwater cameras and the above water camera, which I don't think we ever broadcast from. But we'll get all of those turned off, and then it might be both of these running for most of the winter. Or if we see that the power is not enough to maintain 2 cameras, we'll cut 1 camera, which cuts our energy consumption in half pretty much, and then move to another location. And if everything goes as planned, we'll do this again up at the falls, and I'll show you that system. It's a little more complex up there because we have more batteries. We have two locations that are further apart. We have 2 Wi-Fi hotspots. Oh, didn't mention that. The Wi-Fi hotspot, which is how we broadcast out of here, is right here. It's a white box sticking on the side with 2 antennas sticking up, kind of like the sort that you might see in a mall or an airport tucked over in the corner someplace. And that Wi-Fi is not public Wi-Fi. That Wi-Fi is just how all of these cameras and our iPads, when we're receiving questions from you guys, it's how we communicate with the internet and the outside world. If we were to open it up to public Wi-Fi, you can imagine that it would be completely saturated with Facebook updates and people wanting to stream Netflix and everything else, and we would not be able to have the webcams. I had a thought while I was mentioning Wi-Fi, and it eludes me. Do we have any questions about the tech? Oh, I remember. To me, it's kind of cool. It may not be very cool. These cameras have one cable going to them because they're all plugged into this box by Ethernet. It's not Wi-Fi that the cameras talk to this box. It's by Ethernet, and the Ethernet runs power over it. And for networking systems engineers, that's no big deal. But when I found out 5 years ago about power over Ethernet, I thought that was really neat to have one cable running out to these cameras.
So there are a couple of questions for you, Roy. And hello, everyone. Mike is here, and you haven't seen me yet, but I'm here.
He's the guy expertly guiding the camera around and tripping over our stuff that's behind us.
So one person asks, are these batteries able to work in the extreme cold of winter?
Batteries are okay in the extreme cold of winter as long as they're not completely dead. And the system is designed to shut off and not draw any power out of them after the voltage drops to 11 volts. So they won't freeze at the temperatures we have around here and won't be damaged by the cold. But you're right that when as the temperature drops, the efficiency of the batteries also goes down. So a cold battery can't put out as much power as a warm battery, but the batteries won't be killed by the cold because the solar charger will cut them off before they're drained. And Mike, you are stepping on a cord, and if you end up stepping on one of the plugs, we'll be messed up.
All right. So another question is sort of related to the last one, though, but they may have gotten an answer from this already by looking at the box right there. But how do you protect the batteries and the components from the elements over the winter? Is there anything specific that's done other than...
We put a lid on the front, starters. The lid's got a rubber gasket here. So that'll keep the rain out. There are some drain holes in the bottom, so it will drain out. But it's not heated, it's not dehumidified or anything like that. It does generate a little bit of its own heat just from the electronics, but it's not, it's not really climate controlled. It doesn't have anything other than gravity drawing the rainwater out. And I took this off before we started the chat because we like to get in and plug into these batteries and check the condition too. But it just goes on, locks, and all of our boxes are locked like this, and they all have some rubber gaskets to keep the weather out. I'm guessing that's the kind of question, what they were looking for. We've got a vehicle going by. Oh, I don't think it's. Well, yeah, this is the loud one. Do I have another question while you're... It feels markedly cooler today than yesterday. We have a little more sun, but we have breeze, and I think Mike and I are both feeling the winter chill coming on and pulled out my mittens today, trying to get a little more comfortable.
So another question, can you tilt/move/turn your solar array to capture maximum sunlight?
No, these we have to pick the angle we want and leave them. The better systems that you would install would track the sun. If you were truly interested in getting the absolute most amount of power out of it, that's the way to go. But you also add a lot of complexity to the system, and in an environment like this, it might actually hurt you in the long run, because if that mechanism, let's say the ones on the top of Dumpling, which we can't get to other than by a fairly long hike up the mountain behind us or by helicopter, if they happen to freeze in the wintertime because of the ice that we have around here and they were pointing in the wrong direction, then that would be worse off than just picking the optimal location and angle to the south. So that was a decision made to cut costs and complexity.
And are all the cameras the same maker or model? To my eye, two seem to be higher definition than others.
Which two are higher definition?
Yeah,
he say?
it doesn't say.
Oh, okay.
No.
They are all Sony. Some of them, the ones that move around, are a different model than the fixed ones, but they're all Sonys with the exception of the one on top of Dumpling. That's an Axis, AXXIS. But everything down here is Sony's. I think the Lower River East camera is a newer model. So the one that's over here, which I think Mike was trying to point at, I think this is a newer model than the other one. So it might have slightly better resolution. But that's a good question. They came in these boxes. I didn't really handle them and take a look at them, but the controls at my end and the configuration end of it that I can see looks to be the same. But I know this one is a newer one.
Okay.
Oh, some of the resolution difference also has to do with how much bandwidth they allocate to the camera at that particular time. If you have a static scene, you know, if we just pointed it down here at the boardwalk, it would show incredible detail, and we could have it be very high resolution. You could see the individual grains of the wood, and the reason you can do that is because the deck isn't moving. When you start adding moving things like leaves waving and water moving and bears moving and all of this action going on, you either have to increase the bandwidth for that camera or you have to decrease the resolution. And so what Explorer's always trying to do is find that balance between getting the clearest, sharpest image, but not overloading the system, because we only have a 5 megabit per second pipe, if you will, out of King Salmon, and we have a bunch of cameras here we're trying to get the signal out on. So we have to, it's definitely a balancing act and trade-off. More cameras, lower resolution, fewer cameras, sharper, but we do balance the load on cameras individually.
And that kind of relates to maybe the next question is, if funds were available to upgrade, what would you like to see? But it sounds like even if we upgraded the video quality, our bandwidth is still limiting the feed that goes in and out.
We have, so they're out here in the park, the issue that we have keeping up with everything is power. We knew that going into it. Power is what also derailed the webcams back in 2008 and 2009 frequently. Is that it was, well, 2009 was a good sunny year like this year, but 2010 it was cloudy and we just couldn't keep the system going. So getting more power to the cameras is definitely key. But I think we're probably at the point where we won't put more power in out here because we accomplished our main goal so far, which is to have the cameras live in the spring when the bears are just starting to arrive, and going sometime into the fall after they start to leave here. I think that'll be no problem. If they shut down in the middle of January because there's not enough power, we'll just have to live with that, because I can't see us bringing more batteries and more solar panels out here. You know, maybe if we had a suitcase nuclear reactor, we could keep it going all winter long, but I don't see that in our future. So that's kind of a bottleneck of how many cameras we can run out here, and it would be nice to run more of them simultaneously. The network between here and King Salmon is fine. We could run more cameras on that. So it's sort of two issues that we have to think about whenever, you know, as far as what upgrades are necessary, and that is power out here and then the internet out of King Salmon. It is unbelievably expensive to run these cams 24 hours a day, all summer long at 5 megabits per second. You know, when your internet that you pay for at home has a thing called a fair access policy on it, which may be in very, very fine print that you never even read, but it basically says even though you have an unlimited plan, you may only get 200 or 300 gigabytes a month, something like that, which is more than enough for most people, but not if you're streaming video 24/7 like we are in the summertime. So they have an incredibly expensive internet bill.
And a couple questions about the Dumpling Cam.
Okay.
And I think we wanted to maybe show.
Yeah, do you want to try to walk over there and see?
Yeah, we can do that.
So this is where we're likely to have camera failure as we walk over there, because it's a little more walking, and I think we got really lucky last night walking across the bridge that didn't poop out on us. But we'll get you back as soon as we can. So we'll walk over to the Dumpling Cam, and I may have to step behind the camera to point it. Or are you real familiar where it is, Mike?
I can see it, yeah,
Okay.
so I'm familiar with it. And I apologize, everyone, for making you dizzy and seasick here.
Well, they said yesterday it's really not any worse than watching the underwater camera.
Okay.
Probably if you stand there and
Yep.
shoot up to me. Now I have control of the questions. So while he's getting me in the frame.
Yeah, so a couple people were just sort of interested in the maintenance and the upkeep of the Dumpling Mountain Cam itself. Seems like today maybe it was mostly pointed at the ground.
So I was giving some more thought as I was walking over here to the question about the cameras being different resolution. It feels like the old Riverwatch camera, the one that was low at the falls, was a higher resolution, but I think it's because it's a fixed lens, so you're not getting the degradation by the zoom lens overextending. So that one I think always looks really sharp. And we didn't have it on, but its counterpart, the above water camera down here on the bridge, also I think looked really, really sharp. Are you having
No,
tilt issues or something?
Yeah, we're just a little crooked, but that's all right.
Oh, that won't do it. You don't want to loosen that. You want to mess with the legs.
All right.
Let's see. How many cams will be left on after everyone leaves Brooks Camp was a question. That I don't know what will be on. We don't remove any of them other than the cameras that are attached to the bridge, because the bridge has to come out. So we'll leave on as many as we can, but the company that handles the webcams for Explore.org, IP Video Services Incorporated, they will be monitoring the power consumption and the power generation of the systems, and they'll help us decide how many cams we can leave on. Last year, we left the falls on. We never turned the falls off because the power was always fine, and then it suddenly went away, and I believe it suddenly went away because we had not snow, but we had a frost that just covered everything. It's called Hoarfrost, and it comes when you get really cold temperatures, and it just completely ices over everything. And those those solar panels are at a very shallow angle, and I'll show you those later, and so they don't get as much sun. And then they were completely covered in frost. So we went from having okay power one day to like 2 days later being completely dead. And they didn't come back the whole time. The Lower River camera ran until the first few days of November. And at that point, what we're not sure of is which system lost power, because if any of the links over Dumpling lose power, you can't see beyond that. And I'm trying to remember. I think we could still hit maybe the first repeater on Dumpling, but we couldn't get past that. So cams, we will just be scaling them back, but everything stays in place. So if we have the power, we'll run as many of them as we can. Okay, so this is Mount Dumpling behind us. It's not a particularly high mountain, but it is almost exactly positioned between here and King Salmon. So if you want to get a radio signal out of here, and that's all Wi-Fi is a weak radio signal. If you want to get it out of here, you've got to get it over the mountain, because it can't go through the mountain and it doesn't bend and wrap around the mountain. And so the way to do it, in our case, we're using Wi-Fi. The government also has a network that goes over the top that we use for our radios, our handheld radio repeaters. That's not Wi-Fi, but it's radio. So the way to get from here to King Salmon back to civilization is by bouncing it from here to a series of repeaters over the mountain. So right down to the camera left is where the transmitter was that I pointed out earlier. That sends that Wi-Fi signal the couple of miles to Dumpling. And it's not a great telephoto on there, but can you see it, Mike?
Yeah, let me zoom in here for everyone. So in the frame right now, and that's about as tight as I can go, on the horizon of Dumpling Mountain, you'll see basically a little point, and that's the actual repeater itself, and that's where the Dumpling Mountain Cam is located.
Yeah, so on that site, and I'm seeing if the video will load on the iPad here, which it wasn't doing earlier for some reason, but this signal hits that repeater where, as he said, the Dumpling Cam is. There's a bunch of batteries there and solar panels, and from there it bounces to another repeater, because Mount Dumpling isn't a nice pointy peak. It's a broad, flat dollop of a mountain. And so you can't see the top of the mountain from here. So we hit the edge of it with this transmitter that's down here, and then it goes from that repeater to another repeater, then it goes 30 miles into King Salmon. And that's where it connects to that server, which I talked about yesterday, that compresses the video down to make it even more efficient to send it out over the internet. So that's how the signal has to get out of here. Oh, I can see. Let me see if I can get my, oh, you know, the delay is such, my arm will get tired before I can point to it.
Yeah, and actually I moved it back off of the...
Oh, do you want to zoom in?
Yeah, let me zoom in one more
Can
time.
you, or maybe I can do it here. Because I'll turn this around and see. Okay. It is directly above my finger, which is really out of focus, I know. But directly above my finger, there's just a little nub. What you're seeing is a tower with solar panels, mostly is what you're picking up, because the solar panels are the biggest structure up there. Okay. Let me see if I've got any questions to answer here. Do the snapshot abilities have anything to do with power availability? Why are they frequently not available? That's all at the server end of stuff, and that gets into the part of the system that is the magical part that I don't truly understand. So I don't understand why it works sometimes and why it doesn't work other times. But maybe we can get an answer to that from Explore, because they have some really talented people on this, and I know sometimes they just have to reset some aspect of the system and some of these features come back. So let's see, when will everyone be leaving Brooks Camp? Mike and I leave tomorrow afternoon about 4 o'clock, right after our chat tomorrow. And there will be some law enforcement and bear management folks here for another few weeks. And the last people out are the maintenance crews, because they're here to pull the bridge out of the water, drain the water lines, the sewer lines, winterize everything, and then they'll be out of here by about the middle of October. I had a question about, from a park management point of view, how helpful have the cams been to us? And that's a good question, because when we talked about putting the cams in, there were people that were concerned about putting the cams in, like they had no place in wilderness, and it's not technically wilderness here, but in wild areas like this. They had no place in wild areas, that they have that they'll draw too much attention to the place, that people should earn the right to visit. You shouldn't just be able to tune it into the TV. But park management, you know, this is various people that we discussed this with, but park management felt very strongly that there was a place for the cameras here, and that this is a tremendous tool for us to bring the wonders of Katmai to the people of the world. Our visitation at Brooks Camp is only about 10,000 people a year, usually a little bit less than 10,000 people a year. And that's wonderful. We can't really probably accommodate too many more people. It gets very, very crowded here in July, which is when most of the people come. But to have people truly value and appreciate places like Katmai and Brooks Camp, you need more than 10,000 stewards a year. You need a bunch of people really caring about wild places like this. And you can write books about it, and that's a way to reach people. You can cooperate with documentary filmmakers, and that's a way to reach people. And so this is just another way of reaching out to people. And I felt very strongly when we were setting these up that I didn't want them to just be these one-way cameras where you're just peering into the lives of bears, and it'll be fascinating, and I had no doubt people would be addicted to it. But I wanted there to be more interaction with the staff here, and for us to have these one-on-one conversations. And I think the staff now in Katmai, for the most part, and I know the National Park Service are very excited about opportunities like this. We have a goal as part of our 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, which is coming up in 2016. We have a goal to start to utilize digital technology more, because it makes the parks accessible to everybody, not just the people that can afford the time or the money that it takes to go visit a park. And Katmai is an expensive place to visit. And it requires flying in a small float plane. And I know from reading questions on the iPad that flying on a small float plane is not something that a lot of you are very excited about. So this is just a wonderful way for us to share the incredible scenery and the lives of the bears with everybody. Yeah, I think it's been a really good thing for the park and a good thing for the Park Service. I rambled a little bit there, but let's see. There's 7 more comments here, and then what time is it? I think we'll probably take a break for a little bit, get the stuff back on the charger, and then we'll hopefully have our bear management person joining us here in about 20 minutes. So maybe just a couple more questions. Any more questions on the tech side of things? Let me see. Lots of bear pictures, or bear questions again. Well, I'll go ahead and answer the question about the people rafting. Many of you saw the folks going over the falls in the raft last night, and they are not NPS employees. They are not spouses or relatives of NPS employees. We know who they are, and what the act of rafting the river and going over the falls is not specifically prohibited. The river is open this time of the year to people fishing, to people walking it. The only thing you can't do is fish within 100 yards of the fish ladder at Brooks Falls. You still, however, even though the river is open to walking and rafting, you still have to maintain 50 yards from bears. And it's pretty obvious looking at the video that the individuals in that boat did not maintain 50-yard distance from the bears. And so while the rafting was not illegal, if they did get closer than 50 yards to the bear, that was a prohibited act. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details on it because, you know, that's something that the park is looking into right now. But we know who they are. We know about it. Like many of you, we wish that people wouldn't do that because it does put their lives at risk. Going down the river that close to bears, going over the falls, if anything had happened, they would have been right there in the jacuzzi splashing around, just like any of those bears that were around there may have come and investigated, and that wouldn't have been a good thing. But I think the best thing to do is to stop drawing so much attention to them. I sort of view that activity like an internet troll who gets online and tries to stir things up. And so if we draw attention to it by posting the videos and the photos elsewhere, I think we're kind of rewarding that behavior. And I don't think anybody really wants to see lots of people going over the falls, because you didn't come here to watch that. You came here to watch bears. You want to point over at the magpie? Yesterday when we tried doing the magpie, that's when we lost our signal. Oh, that's a bashful one.
I think we got a couple seconds.
Did you get a few seconds of it? Okay. So let's see, I answered that question. We'll save the bear questions for later. Although I can answer quickly, bears start going into hibernation the end of October. Somebody said the cams have made them want to visit, and we hear that a lot from people that call and write the park over the winter wanting to know about visiting. They say that they knew about the place or they didn't know about the place, but now after watching the cams they really want to visit. And that was, you know, probably the biggest concern that folks had here, is that we know that we're pretty much at capacity. I mean, the lodge is already full for July of next year right now. The campground will be full within hours of the permits going on sale. So we're already pretty much at capacity, so there was a concern that we might draw more attention to it. That's not to say that, you know, seeing these cams and wanting to come here is not valid. You know, that's wonderful. I wish you guys could all come and see it, and I know a bunch of you are planning on trying to come next year, and that'll be really fun to meet you. Let's see, 14 more comments, and then I'll pick through those, make sure we don't have any more tech questions, and then I think we'll take a break here for a little bit and get set up for the next one. What we'll do is go find a spot where we can plug the camera in, and we'll just give you a nice view, something different than that you haven't seen on the cameras. And I'm wondering if maybe, Mike, we just need to turn it around this way, because I don't think they've ever seen
behind the platform.
Behind the platform. There's a marsh here that bears disappear into behind the platform, and they don't spend a lot of time here because there's not a lot to eat or do here. But there's a mud hole over here, which they sometimes come and eat the mud and clay out of. And are you on that? Yeah,
I'm on that
okay.
Little mud hole there.
So that sort of filthy looking area down there, it's got some algae growing, but they'll come and they'll dig around in there. There's a particular hole that they'll go dig in, and they'll eat this clay. And biologists believe that it may serve a couple of purposes. You know, it may be helping to rid them of parasites. It may be for some sort of nutritional benefit, that you know, maybe some trace minerals in there. But clay is also one of the ingredients and stuff like kaopectate. So it may just be helping with their, you know, upset digestion. If you could see what the trails look like around here, you wouldn't want to visit this time of the year, because if you've been eating nothing but rotting salmon for the last month, just imagine what your bowel movements would look like, and then multiply it by, you know, the size of a bear. There are puddles. You can't see the size I'm doing, but there are huge puddles of bear diarrhea everywhere around camp this time of the year. So that eating that clay may actually provide some help for them in their upset bellies. Oh, who was the bear camped outside my window this morning? I don't know. I missed it.
I know that number 94 walked by.
94 walked by?
I had to jump inside a building because she walked around a building about the same time I did. So, and then she walked right by it, right in front of your cabin. I don't know if that was the same one or not. There's been many bears walking the beach today that I've noticed.
Okay. I'll answer a couple of bear questions here for just a couple more minutes. A young lady named Madison would like to know, of the 2,200 bears in Katmai, how many of the bears do we think visit Brooks Falls? And that varies from year to year, Madison. We can ask Leslie this when she gets up here how many different bears she identified this year. And when I say identified, she may not have known who the bear was, but she recognized it as a different bear. So she'll tally up all the bears. There'll be some that were unknown, and they'll just have a number that will be a new number for this year, and then there'll be the returning bears. And she can tell us how many bears we had, but we have had anywhere from about 50 bears in Brooks Falls to about maybe 70 or 75 in the 10 years that I've been here. And I was here for the peak. The peak number of bears was in about 2007 or 2008. So those are the years where we were getting about 70 bears. Biologists don't count the cubs if they're still with their mother. So in those years, in 2007, 2008, when we had 70, 75 bears, we also had maybe 25 or so cubs that were with their mothers still. And so that puts us close to 100 bears that utilize this area. And so there are two ways of looking at that. This is a small area. This is about 1 square mile, the Brooks River, Brooks Falls area. So that's a lot of bears in 1 square mile. But that also means that in the rest of the park, there are also lots and lots of bears. 2,200 bears roughly for the whole park. So this is an area with one of the densest populations of bears around. There are more bears in this part of the world than there are people. King Salmon and Naknek, the two towns, there are only about 750 humans, and this area the peninsula has, gosh, we say it in the film and I can't remember now, like 30,000 bears on the Alaska Peninsula. Way more bears than people. So I hope that answers your question, Madison. Well, I did see this question yesterday that I forgot to answer, or I saw it when we were scrolling through, and I forgot it, and I saw it again last night. So I'm sorry I missed it. And that is a question about the new bridge to go over here. And it looks like the park will be receiving funding for that bridge starting in 2015, and that means we would start the first phases of construction in fall of 2015. So the money would come in October of 2014, which is our fiscal year 15, and then we would build the bridge. The bridge would start at the lodge, and we haven't shown you the lodge because we don't have Wi-Fi there, but some of you have been to the lodge. It would start right at the lodge between the lodge office and the dining hall. It would come down, cross about where the current bridge is, join the lower river platform over by the satellite platform where we started the chat this morning, and then continue on up to an area that I also can't show you because it doesn't have Wi-Fi coverage, but it's where the bus gets parked. And Mike is panning the camera over that way, and we'll maybe show you or what you're looking at, Mike?
Well, that's the direction that the bridge is going to go, basically.
Oh, no, that way. Because it'll cut, right through the narrow part of the marsh here, and then go through the forest there. And that whole section of bridge, it'll be about 2,200 feet of bridge and boardwalk, and that is designed to keep the river flowing and the bears and the salmon able to move through there and keep us up away from the bears so that we're not disturbing them. And so construction on that should start in the fall of 2015. It's going to take 2 years to build. and most of the work will be done in the wintertime, at least according to our current plan. So you can check on the park's webpage to read more about that. I think it's all still there. After I said that, I just thought maybe I need to check the links to make sure those are still valid. But the plans for how this is going to be designed and built went through a public comment period last year, and so those documents, I believe, are still on our website. Okay, I swear this is the last one. I hate to leave so many questions on the table here. Is it possible to get a webcam on Margeaux Creek when things are slow in August? Nope. Margeaux Creek is in designated wilderness, and so we're prohibited from putting installations in designated wilderness unless that construction is necessary for the management of that wilderness. So putting a webcam in there would not be consistent with the 1964 Wilderness Act, and it'd be cool. You know, there are lots of places in this park where it would be amazing to put cameras, but we have to be very careful about not intruding into the wilderness with technology like this. What camera are we using for the salmon camera? Is it the same as the surface cameras? It's the same as the above water camera, which has not been on, and the river watch camera. Same, exactly the same. They're small, about the size of a small can of tomato paste. Cameras that fit inside some waterproof housings. They're fixed. They don't zoom. They don't pan. They don't tilt. They're just stuck in one view. And you'll notice that they're all off kilter a little bit. When we were mounting them, we didn't have the network running because we were sort of building it from both ends, and so we couldn't check the pointing of the cameras until everything was sealed up and we were sitting back at home. So we'll get those level for next year. Okay, I think that's going to have to be it for now. I'm, again, sorry if we missed some of your questions, but we'll be back live here in maybe about 15 minutes or so. And in the meantime, we're going to give you a nice view off across this marsh behind the platform, and you can look at the mountain, and that is Mount Kelez, K-E-L-E-Z. It's one of the places where the bears around here will go to den. You're not going to see any bears marching up there going into hibernation now because there's still too darn much food to eat down here. But we'll go ahead and turn off our microphones now, and you can enjoy that for a few minutes. And we'll see you back here to talk again about bears and less about technology in about 15 minutes.